Hi everyone! Something a bit different in today's video. I'm going to critique some of my patrons' artwork. Recently on my Patreon channel I held a pastel competition for my patrons, and I'm going to show you the winners and also some of the runners-up who won themselves a personal critique from me. A critique is something that everyone can learn from, so I hope that you find this helpful. If you haven't already, please do subscribe here on YouTube for all of my free content, and do consider joining our growing group over on Patreon for lots of longer length tutorials and competitions and lots more. So I'm going to take you through some of my top picks from the competition, and I'll show you these on my laptop, let you have a closer look at some of the artwork while I critique it. But firstly, I wanted to say a huge congratulations to all of the patrons who entered. I was really blown away by the standard of work across the board, because in this group we have a mixture of complete beginners who've never used pastel before, right up to some professional artists who are working in the medium. So a huge congratulations to everyone who plucked up the courage to send their artwork, because I know exactly what it's like. Although I also judge some competitions, I still enter my own work in competitions, and I understand the nerve-wracking feeling of hitting that send button and sending your entry in and hoping that it's good enough to compete with the other entries. But to be honest, I wouldn't get too hung up on competitions, because each one really is based on the personal preferences and taste of whoever's judging. So you really shouldn't take it personally if you don't get anywhere in competitions. But this is just a quick slideshow showing you all of the entries that I had to choose from in this competition. So difficult to choose, but I hope that through these critiques and chatting a little bit about the winners, that you'll begin to understand why I chose those pieces, and maybe begin to see a little bit of the thought process when someone is judging your art in one of these competitions. So let's firstly have a look at first place and second place awards. I'm going to go into further critique for the other prize winners, but I just wanted to explain quickly my first and second place choices. So it wasn't intentional that they've both turned out to be a cat portrait, but I think you'll agree that they're totally different paintings, and I find it really hard to choose between these two, as I loved them both, but for very different reasons. So let's have a look at first place, this beautiful Maine Coon cat. And I love how she has tackled the background, leaving it loose, and you can really see the artist's marks. It's just beautifully soft and loose in the background, setting the cat off perfectly. All of these lovely soft edges around the cat really make it pop out from the background. It's also a beautiful muted palette, so the colours throughout the cat seem to be throughout the background. Everything seems very much in harmony. And when I zoom out, my favourite part I think is this front area on the cat's chest. Just look at the beautiful strokes that have gone into making that part seem really 3D, like the fur's coming out towards you. And I love the fact that when you do zoom right in, it's not filled with detail and individual hairs, it's really quite loose. And in contrast then, which really draws our eye, on the face we've got this beautiful detail where each stripe of colour is beautifully worked into the next. Really a lot of thought put into all the direction of the fur, as well as the colour choices. And all in all, just a really stunning painting. But on the other side then, for my second place, this is quite different. A lot less detail, a very different type of cat portrait. But let's start with the background. I really love the background in this. I think it's very simple, almost like an abstract setting, but it still helps give the cat some weight within the picture. I like the muted tones used, the two colours, and I also love how there is some element of the 3D brought in via the cat's lovely subtle shadow around the base, and I love how it disappears off the shadow of the tail just off the edge of the piece To me, this painting is really beautiful because of the overall composition, just the overall look of it, I think is stunning. It really reminds me of some of the animal portraits that I've seen within older Renaissance paintings, where they're perhaps just in the bottom corner as part of a larger portrait, therefore painted with a bit less detail, but still beautifully realistic and just a lovely feel to this painting. So when you zoom in on this one, you can see that there's a lot less detail in the fur. But detail isn't always necessary. I think that the soft colour choices here, along with the beautiful composition overall, make for a really striking painting. So 2 extremely different painting choices for my first and second place awards. Interesting to see 2 cats done in such very different ways. But let's get on to the pieces now that I want to critique. So huge congratulations to first and second place. But then we also have some artists who won themselves a personal critique, and those are the artists that I'm going to look at in this video. So let's have a look at this beautiful pet portrait of Jack Russell. This is a really beautifully executed portrait. I was so impressed with this one. And I think the realism overall is excellent. When you look back at the piece, it really does pop from its dark surroundings. And I like this artist's choice to include the black behind the dog, as I think the dog actually stands out really well against a dark background. And they've done very well with the background, just to give us a hint of what's going on back there, but hopefully without distracting from your main subject. The only one thing that I would say about the background here is perhaps this bottom area. I wasn't sure within the painting until I saw the photo reference what exactly this was. And I think it might have been a better choice to leave out the little colourful stripy area and perhaps make this mat a little darker in tone, just like it is in the photo reference, meaning that this lovely white edge of the front of the dog would stand out really well just against the mat on its own. So perhaps taking some of these lovely shadow colours from the front of the dog and making that more the colour of the mat. And this is something that I've done in some of my paintings where I've looked back afterwards and realised that perhaps a little area that becomes distracting in the painting could have been left out. And sometimes you just don't think of this at the beginning, and it's not until after the painting that you realise. I've done it many times, just left a little strip of colour in that is in the photo reference, and afterwards maybe regretted that. But a very minor thing, the rest of the background I absolutely love, really sets the dog off. And for the dog itself then, I really like how the artist has achieved realism on the dog, but again without going into super detail. So not every hair on the fur, but it really doesn't matter because the colour choices are beautiful. The shadow tones are beautiful. You get such a 3D feel from this piece, even though they haven't painted every single hair. I especially love the looseness of the neck and the chest area, and the colours that they've chosen in here to describe the shadows work really well. Somehow they've managed to take the photo reference and make it brighter and warmer in their painting, and that's not an easy task, so well done for that. One little area that I would point out perhaps would be along the bottom of the mouth here, or along the top lip, just to watch for the shape along here, and also how bright the highlight colours are in there. It's actually quite dull and dark on this particular part of the mouth, and perhaps not quite as much of a gap inside the mouth as over here. This was the only thing that really stood out a little bit in the proportions of the dog. Otherwise, it's really good. I especially like the brightness that the artist has brought to the eyes. I actually think the eyes have come out much more clear and bright in their painting. So you know that you're on the right track if you're managing to improve upon the photo reference. And also top marks to this artist for snapping this beautiful shot on their camera phone. That's great that these days you can use something as readily available as a phone to get such great photo reference. So the second artist to win a critique. And a very different piece, the art competition that I ran was left open so you could enter any subject matter you wanted. And of course that made my job 10 times harder, because how on earth do you judge a pet portrait against a human portrait, against a landscape? And the list goes on for the variety of different pieces that I have to put against each other. So it's not always possible to say that one is better than the other. That's just not the way art works. But in this case, I absolutely loved this artist's rendition of this scene. The handling of the clouds and the sea and the wet beach area is beautifully done. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of some Turner paintings, how they've handled the sky and the ocean especially. I much prefer the colours in their painting than what is in the photo reference. And this is just a classic example of how even when you work from a photograph, you can really add your artist's style or your mark to the piece. You don't have to paint it exactly like the photograph. So I really love the mood that they've caught here, and also all of the movement within the waves, the looseness of the marks and the colours used really add to the motion without having to add huge amounts of detail. Now, the part that sort of drew my attention was in the figure itself. To be honest, I would absolutely love this painting if it were just the seascape on its own. I think it's really a beautiful little study of the ocean. And the only thing that really drew my attention was that there was a bit of an awkward feel about the stance of the human in the painting. And from seeing the photo reference, I can actually see that they've done pretty well to capture the person as they were standing. And I think that actually the main problem comes from the photo reference itself. So if you're working from photos of figures, just try to be careful in your choice of the photo reference, because if the figure doesn't look quite like they're flowing or natural in the photo reference, then that's going to translate into your painting as well. And where sometimes you get away with those things in a photograph, it's much more difficult in your painting. So to me, this figure just looks a little bit static, or in between poses, if you know what I mean. And I think because of that, the painting also seems a little bit in between poses. I'm not sure if she's standing still or if she's moving forward. So my tip would always be, if you're taking photo reference to paint from and there are figures in it, take several photographs of the person actually moving so that you get a choice of different steps to choose from. Because amongst those photos, one of the figures will look a little bit more natural than the rest. So I always take 2 or 3 photos in sequence when I'm trying to choose figures to add to paintings. And that way I can have a bit of choice and choose the most natural looking figure. But other than this, what a beautiful little study, and I hope to see more from this artist in future of more seascapes especially. So there you go. What a wonderful standard of artwork to get narrowed down and choose some winners from. Always a very difficult task. But I promise I'll run another competition very soon over on my Patreon channel. As I said at the start of the video, please do subscribe here, though on YouTube you'll get lots of free content here to get you started. But I hope that you've enjoyed this, and do let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more of this type of video, more critique videos. Do you find this helpful? Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.